Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're reviewing the Dawn of Fire series novel, The Martyr'S Tomb, by author Marc Collins. As always with reviews, I'll do a spoiler-free review, followed by a little spoiler talk at the end on notable moments I want to discuss. But with that said, let's begin by checking out the synopsis off the back of the book. The Indomitus crusade burns on across the stars, while new threats emerge to challenge mankind's resurgence. As the Kingdom of Iron is secured, and the Primarch Reborn's thoughts turn to future salience, the arch-enemy strikes back against the Crusade's forces. The shrine worlds of the Golden Chain are all but broken, and only Velua remains defiant. Canoness Erinya of the Order of Our Martyred Lady and Champion Gaheris of the Black Templars hold the line, fighting against the plague-ridden cultists, reducing the planet to anarchy. While the war rages on and the true enemy makes itself known, the fate of Velua and the wider crusade may rest upon the shoulders of another of the Imperial Regent's agents, the disgraced rogue trader, Katzler Helvinter. Heroes rise and worlds fall, and only the light of faith will guide the warriors of the Imperium to their destiny. So, Book 6 of the Dawn of Fire series certainly feels like it's flying along now. As the synopsis highlights, this novel is largely separated into two distinct theatres of war: the defence of the world Velua and the rogue trader Helvinter's quest. I may pronounce some names wrong here as I had the book, not the audio version. However, I gotta tell you, being able to dive into a book this week, being in and out of hospitals visiting my mum, has been an absolute godsend. One of the biggest reasons I absolutely love the lore, just the perfect escapism it can provide. I'll start with the Defense of Velua narrative. As you expect, this follows several defenders of the world, mainly Canoness Erinya and the Black Templars led by Gaheris, the Emperor's champion. The Sisters and the Templars are certainly getting a lot of page time, as it were, in the Dawn of Fire series thus far. It's understandable with the growing element of faith being so important to the Imperium's defense, but I do have to say I hope we get one or two installments where some unheralded chapters get some light. I'd love to see the Salamander's involvement in the Indomitus crusade, for example, or Cantor's appointment as Praetor in Carmine of the Loki sector. But it's undeniable, it feels like the faith of the Sisters and the Templars is more important than ever. Now, Canoness Erinya's story is quite a surprising one, and one that really feels quite unique and original. While yes, this is the sister leading the defense as best she can, you also get a very personal story of a woman and sister dealing with a great sense of grief and loss. And again, this felt very unique. While the sisters have always represented a more human story than the Astartes, such is their devotion to the Emperor, you've very rarely seen much else outside of those bounds. However, here with Erinya, it feels far more a personal story than you may expect to find. A lot of time spent on her inner thoughts and grief, all taking place throughout the attempted defense of the world. It was quite a nice balance for her to be a canoness also, attempting to balance this profound personal loss with the constant weight of responsibility, with her fellow sisters of the Order still looking to her for leadership. Conversely, Gaheris of the Black Templars is everything you would expect of an Emperor's champion. This guy is a God Emperor blessed wrecking ball. As such, you don't necessarily get the emotional depth of Erinya's story, but you don't need to. This is straight up 40k. The Black Templars doing what they do best. With the Templars and the Emperor's Champion, you know what you're getting. Heretics hacked to pieces in the name of the Emperor. And they most certainly provide. Now, there is a development within the Templar narrative that I found very surprising, and was actually the highlight of the novel for me. We'll talk about it a little bit more later, but it managed to add a lot more weight to their story. It gave it an interesting twist, with while part of me knowing where it would go in one respect, the other part of me was wondering at what price would it come. And I think this element was probably the most enjoyable Templar narrative I've read yet within the Dawn of Fire series. It gave it a bit of a moral dynamic and drama that they don't usually have. Now, could it have been dived into and fleshed out a little bit more? Yes, maybe. But it definitely gave it all a much more intriguing dynamic. The third story thread of rogue trader Katla Helvinter though, was definitely my most enjoyed narrative of the main three. The second I saw the cover, I knew she would be of Fenris, but my first thought was an Inquisitor rather than a rogue trader. However, I have to admit it always feels odd reading a Fenrisian sailing the stars when they are not in the Space Wolves. I'm not sure I could ever imagine a rogue trader coming from Fenris, but I loved her character, and more importantly, I loved her story. With Katla, you kind of had a middle ground between Irina and the Templars. A personal story, a reason for why she is invested in what she's doing, and yet that same dedication to duty. With her, you kind of had the middle ground between the two. It may be the least action-packed of the three narratives overall, but it felt by far the most intriguing one for me. And it felt of all the cast of supporting characters, her crew, so to speak, had the best. It didn't spend too much time jumping from one to the other, and each character felt unique, whereas the Sisters and Templars at times could seem to blend together. The custodian Augustus, for example, is a particular standout within Katla's story, though an undoubted shout out has to go to the Black Templar Dreadnought Toron. He could have definitely done with a lot more screen time. I loved his character. Now, a glance at the cover will tell you the enemy in this one is the Death Guard. And the story did a nice slow burning build up to their arrival, certainly feeling the ante being upped when they finally arrived. However, I wouldn't say they were necessarily memorable apart from that ultimate entrance. More a means to an end. I think largely you could have replaced them with any other traitor legion and it wouldn't have overall changed the dynamic of the story. I'd say negatives wise, there was a few too many point of views early on in this one, which stopped the momentum a little to begin with, particularly in regards to the Sisters' story on Velua. And with three really central character stories to tell overall, I think the time could have been spent better off with them. I would say I would have liked the big development within the Templar story to be a little bit more stretched out. It certainly added to the weight and drama overall, but it just happened a little bit too quickly. It would have been great to just build on what those repercussions of this moment were going to be. And I did feel the Sisters' story after this did begin to drag a little at times. However, admittedly that may be because by the final third, I found Katla the Rogue Trader's narrative to be the one that had really gripped my attention the most. Score-wise, it's a good read, and like I said personally, it's been a lifesaver for me to dive into this week. So I'd give it a 3 out of 5. It's a perfectly good, enjoyable read. Not one that necessarily got my pulse racing or goosebumps raising, but one I enjoyed. It's not my favourite installment of the Dawn of Fire series, but it fits in nicely, and by the end it clearly moved the narrative forward. So what more could you ask for? But that's it for the spoiler-free review. Now some spoiler talking points I would like to discuss. So that big Templar development was Gaheris the Emperor's champion receiving a vision from the Emperor and him deciding to leave the world. Now I absolutely loved this. The Templars leaving Valua in the middle of its defense was an absolutely great development for them and the story of the world's defense. Beforehand, it was just your run-of-the-mill battle story. Another story of Templars and Sisters going against the enemy. However, this development immediately heightened the tension and drama. I would have loved for there to be a bit more resistance at the Templars' withdrawal, with the Templars even having to fight their way off the world. However, it did definitely work in itself. The Templars leaving, abandoning a world to its fate, gives a nice little twist to these holier-than-thou Astartes warriors. It would have been cool to really see that moral dynamic amped right up, with how far were the Templars truly willing to go to follow that vision. However, again, like I said, I really enjoyed the narrative regardless. Having the Templar dreadnought Terron actually oppose the Emperor's champion and saying they needed to stay was a fantastic little scene, and it's shame he didn't get any more page time thereafter. He got his final stand we all knew he was going to get, but it just would have been nice to see him interacting with his fellow defenders a bit more before then. Now the second thing I want to discuss here is the Mechanicus Magos glimpsing, for want of a better expression, a Necron deity within the currents of the Warp/Rift. Now I've seen this referred to as the Silent King, and hey, it may well be, but on first reading that didn't come across as Sarek to me. I'll read it a couple more times and see how my mind settles on it, but something dark and vast in the warp shadow, I dunno, didn't scream Sarek to me at first. Very intriguing and suspicious to say the least. We'll definitely have to discuss that one next week. Another big talking point for me that I've taken out of this was another vision of a child filled with golden light, filled with ancient knowledge. Could be a future reference for the Saint who will save Guilliman in the Dark Imperium Plague War book. However, I can't help but feel it's more a possible reference to the Star Child narrative once again. I dunno, but it certainly feels like it's building up to having a reborn Emperor. I hope not, because I love the Emperor as he is. I'd be gutted if they killed this current incarnation of the Emperor off. But hey, we'll have to wait and see. And finally, the final development is the finding of the Attilan Gate. What surely must be the launch point for Guilliman's grand invasion of Imperium Nihilus to come. Almost feels a bit like a 40k DS9, a crossing of the rift that expands and closes in a stable cycle. You better call Cisco and get a space station built there pronto, Guilliman. However, yep, that's it. A few good developments and future discussions to be had. And overall again, a perfectly enjoyable enough read for me. As always everyone, what did you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.